What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, yesterday morning, the Pokemon Presents happened, and from what I could tell, based on the reaction online, it was probably a pretty good advertisement for Pokemon Sleep, but we'll go over all the announcements that were made there here today. Also, we are going to be talking about this interesting situation that's popped up for the PlayStation 5, seemingly having a hardware problem with the USB ports. And we'll also be talking about some recent comments that were made by the Take-Two CEO when it comes to backwards compatibility. And, that Switch 2 report actually comes to mind from it. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with Starfield, as there has been some discussion going around with the advertisement, or lack thereof, I guess, from Microsoft when it comes to what's, shaping up to be their biggest game in a long time. For Bethesda, it's a huge release for them. Well, we did get some advertisement, but it's actually from Samsung, and it's an interesting direction to approach this from. You can see some of the commercial here showing off Starfield on a Samsung TV. Of course, utilizing their gaming hub or their application that lets you just stream Xbox games to your TV with a controller synced up. As they say, no console required, which, from Samsung's perspective, they don't really care about the Xbox console. They care about the idea of their TV having that application that just adds more features to it and the ability to play a game like Starfield without needing any kind of console. You just have a Game Pass subscription and a controller, of course, and you're good to go. And for Microsoft, sure, they just want that Game Pass subscription. But for people who are wondering, there you go. We're starting to see some commercials, we'll say some ads for Starfield, just also saying you don't necessarily need an Xbox to access it. Also, speaking of game streaming, it does appear that Sony is starting to roll out a beta test for their own PlayStation 5 streaming service, and it appears they're targeting a resolution that we haven't seen from xCloud yet. We can see this posted up by VGC, where they say, according to users who have been selected for the beta, their service offers 720p, 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. This from Sony saying when this feature launches, cloud game streaming for supported PS5 titles will be available for use directly on your PS5 console. That means as a premium member, it'll be easier to jump into your favorite games without downloading them first onto your PS5 console. And again, I kind of view this as more of a benefit, an add-on for the premium service, or for Microsoft's side, Game Pass Ultimate, as opposed to the part of the platform that you would focus all the value in on. Like, I still would prefer to play my games natively on a console or a handheld or something like that. But the fact that there's a game might be 125 gigabytes, you hit a button, it'll at least let you jump in so you can try it for an hour before dedicating, at some points, a lot of time to download a game like that, patch it, etc. It is interesting that they're going to have 4K options available even in this beta, which is something, like I mentioned, Microsoft is still working up to. So I'll be curious to see how that actually looks in practice, and definitely how it performs overall when it comes to, the input latency, which for Sony hasn't been great with some of their previous iterations for cloud streaming. Oh, and we have a bit of a last-second delay for WrestleQuest. That was supposed to have come out like 2 days ago, but they put this statement out like hours before its release, where they say Megacat Studios and Skybound Games announced today that WrestleQuest will now be launching August 22nd across all platforms. When performing final checks on one of our launch platforms, we discovered it was possible for players to lose their save game progress when playing WrestleQuest on multiple different devices. Yeah, that's kind of important. You probably don't want to lose your progress in what's an RPG. It's obviously something you want to work towards over time and not have to restart maybe 10 hours into the game or something. It's interesting that this was brought up right before release, unless maybe a reviewer or something found it and just passed it along to them. But at least in this case, it's about a 2-week or so delay, so I guess look towards August 22nd if you were going to be picking up WrestleQuest. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Pokemon Presents. This aired yesterday morning and was indeed roughly 35 minutes long, but based on reactions on social media, it appears that maybe it was 25 minutes too long. Like a solid 10-minute presentation, jumping from piece to piece, might have been a bit better for people, because there were definitely a lot of down spots in this presentation. But we will be going over all the announcements that were made, as well as I think definitely a big announcement that I was very excited to see. But Let's start from the top here. We have the Pokemon World Championships that getting a big spot. Then we have Pokemon Path to the Peak. It's an upcoming animated web miniseries. Okay, it looks like it's focused on the Pokemon trading card game. It's going to be available on YouTube August 11th, so just a couple of days from now. They did show Detective Pikachu Returns. That, of course, out in October. This is just another trailer. The visuals getting kind of beaten up online. Don't really blame them. I mean, it's not exactly the best looking game at all, so it's also $50, I guess, so it's kind of a budget title, but there you go. Detective Pikachu Returns coming up, like I said, in October. Pokemon Horizons. Okay, this is the new series that they're going to have. This is slated to air September 8th. Pokemon Go also had a spot here at the Pokemon Go Fest. It's going to run from August 26th to the 27th. Pokemon Unite, they showed off Mewtwo. So I'm not really familiar at all with Pokemon Unite. Let me know if you're playing this. Maybe this was a very exciting announcement, but August 17th, look towards that to unlock Mewtwo License Y. All right. Pokemon Masters EX. This is the mobile game, which, funny enough, this is the thing that actually leaked out this date early, August 8th for the Pokemon Presents. So there's going to be a special in-game event. All right. Then we have Pokemon Cafe Remix. Okay. Pokemon Trading Card Game plus Pokemon Stadium 2 for Nintendo Switch Online. This, I think, for many people, probably the highlight of this presentation, and that's kind of saying something since we already knew both of these games would eventually come to the NSO service. But I will admit, I fired up Pokemon Trading Card Game. It's still fun. I mean, it's simplistic, obviously, based on the rule set and the cards available, as this would have been like the first couple of packs, really, of Pokemon cards. I think it also included Fossil, I think, from what I remember. But either way, it is, I think, a pretty cool snapshot in time. Definitely something to check out. And hey, if you were curious about maybe learning the basics of the Pokemon card game, not a bad way to do it, although I feel like the rules have changed quite a bit probably over the last, 20 some odd years. What's interesting, though, is it does have online multiplayer, so you could technically card battle some of your friends over the internet, and Card Pop works over the internet. It also works locally. Now, if you're unsure what that is, back then you used the IR port on the top of your Game Boy Color, and you would point it at another Game Boy Color's IR port, and then it would give you a random card, which was necessary to get all the cards in the game because some were actually locked behind that feature, which was pretty annoying back then. But you also have Pokemon Stadium 2, so we at least had some stuff that just dropped immediately. Let's see, then we had a Good Sleep Day event. It's coming to Pokemon Sleep for the night of the full moon, apparently. Then we had Paldean Wins. That's an original web series. All right, that's airing on YouTube September 6th. Then we had Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which these are big announcements, obviously, for the DLC packs that they have already announced, as there are 2 of them. And there's a Mewtwo Terra Raid Battle. This is an event that's taking place September 1st to the 17th. And surprise, it's Mewtwo. That's the big star for this event. And that was something that had leaked out early through an ad. And Mew, there's a limited time mystery gift code as well. Definitely want to look into that one. And then we had the downloadable content with a release date for the Teal Mask. That's coming September 13th. Remember, the second part, that's still planned for winter 2023. And that was the entire Pokemon Presents show. And I guess if you were just a big Pokemon fan in general, you probably enjoyed this for what it was. But if you were tuning in maybe to see a brand new Switch game or something in that regard, probably not the best presentation to sit through for all 35 minutes, but from what I saw, Pokemon fans were okay with it. Switch fans kind of fell asleep during it, but let me know what you thought about the Pokemon Presents down below. I was just really happy to see the Pokemon trading card game finally head to NSO after being promised a long time ago. We've been waiting for this roadmap basically to run out, but yeah, I guess Nintendo and the Pokemon Company saved the best for last with those Game Boy games. Next up, let's talk about some interesting comments that were made by Strauss Zelnick, as, of course, Take-Two did report on their financials, which, I mean, Grand Theft Auto 5, my gosh, 185 million copies sold is ridiculous. Red Dead Redemption 2, now at 54 million copies sold. So yeah, turns out Rockstar and Take-Two, they're doing pretty well over there, which once again brings into question the entire situation of the minimal port job for Red Dead Redemption, but we talked about that yesterday, so check that out if you're wondering about that whole thing. However, Strauss-Zelnick did discuss backwards compatibility, which we've talked about a little bit with the next generation Switch, you can say, and if it will or won't be backwards compatible. Well, one part of that report from VGC mentioned that there were some publishers that were kind of leaning on Nintendo to not do backwards compatibility, and some were wondering and they thought, hey, that sounds weird. Why wouldn't they want it to have backwards compatibility? Well, it appears even Strauss-Zelnick is out in public kind of like, well, wouldn't be a bad thing if it didn't have backwards compatibility. We can see this posted up over on IGN with Strauss-Zelnick stating that he felt backwards compatibility was a benefit to consumers. However, he added that he'd be surprised if platforms didn't offer that with an upgrade that is sort of a mid-cycle. However, not certain it's a must-have. Then there was a follow-up question asking about the Switch. Would he consider that to be mid-cycle, quote unquote? Zelnick replied, remains to be seen. As in, we'll see what Nintendo does. Even he's not necessarily alluding one way or the other if Nintendo will have backwards compatibility. But it is interesting, right? Even Strauss-Zelnick's like, it's not a must-have. Look, if it's not backwards compatible, we got no problem selling you Red Dead Redemption for $50. And I mean, these companies are out there to make money. So yeah, there's probably a very good reason, I think, that they weren't out there really pushing the idea of that Xbox version. They're like, hey, yeah, Red Dead Redemption exists on the Xbox, but like the PS4 and the Switch version, those are $50. You should be looking at those. By the way, Red Dead Redemption Game of the Year that has Undead Nightmare on the Xbox, it's like $28, $29 on Amazon right now. And you just pop it in your Xbox and that's it. It works. In fact, it's in 4K 30 already. So if you have an Xbox Series X, even an Xbox One, I mean, you could technically pop it in there too. So something to keep in mind, just as we're going towards the eventual Switch successor reveal. I believe there will be backwards compatibility, but I can't say with 100% certainty, just the way that some of these publishers, of course, could be leaning on Nintendo in the background without us actually knowing. So here's hoping it's backwards compatible, but I guess you never really know. Next up, let's talk about an interesting hardware situation that the PlayStation 5 was facing over Evo. Of course, being the big fighting game event. And yeah, it turns out there were a lot of fight sticks being plugged into PlayStation 5 consoles over and over. Remember, Sony bought Evo, and guess what? They're using PlayStation consoles at this point, that being the PS5. And people had some thoughts about that on social media, which we can see, for example, this posted up over on X. This is from Sabre, who says, Evo is proving that PS5 is not the answer. USB ports are melting like, I assume that's supposed to be crazy, or I'm just old and it's actually cray, I don't know. USB on his controller melted. This is not isolated. We need to go PC or Xbox at least. Now, if you're wondering what exactly they're talking about, there were some images that were shared. For example, this one's from Eduardo, who, according to Engadget, is currently at Google, AR engineer, shows off this image of the end of their USB fight stick, saying mine was not the only controller that melted down. This is just terrible. You need to do something about the lack of heat dissipation, especially if you're going to use PS5s in tournaments. Now, the big thing that people were pointing to is that the back port of the PlayStation 5 console, that USB port, is what was being used consistently throughout the event, which, yeah, you only have one USB port on the front, and if people are going to be fighting and they both have fight sticks, they need another USB port, they would go to the back. Now, technically, yes, air is being pulled through the system and will be dispelled right around that USB port. It could indeed weaken the plastic. However, I do wonder how many people are plugging and unplugging their fight sticks over and over and over again throughout that weekend on all these different PlayStation 5 consoles, because I've seen the USB ports ripped out of systems for a long time. In fact, the Xbox 360 had an interesting situation where if you ripped the USB piece out, that plastic piece, and the pins inside started getting wrapped and touched each other, the system wouldn't power on at all. We'd have to go in there and replace USB ports all the time on the Xbox 360, although I have a feeling that had to do with people more or less ripping USB sticks and other things out improperly, as opposed to it just getting really hot. And I do question if there would actually be enough heat to melt the plastic, but I guess it could weaken it enough to where if somebody ripped it out sideways or something, that yeah, that plastic guide would go with it, and probably the pins would stay behind in that USB port. But you know what this got me thinking about is we know, or at least we've heard through reports, that Sony is more or less planning a slim revision of the PS5, or just a revision in general that will have an attachable disk drive. I almost wonder if it will have two USB Type A ports on the front, because that would, I think, be better overall for the fighting game scene, where it is away from the vents in the back with all the air circulating through, and it's much more readily available, because that has to be an awkward thing where somebody has a fight stick on the front, other one on the back, and it's just, I don't know, it seems like a strange situation there. So something to keep in mind, but also, I guess, use your front USB Type A port more than the back one. Although I still think this is an isolated case until we start hearing more and more people talk about it outside of a big fighting game convention where everyone gets together and starts jamming fight sticks in the PS5s constantly. And in our last bit of news, let's talk a little bit about AI in games. I know AI has been brought up a lot for development, and if it would either speed up development or start replacing people who are developing games. But there is one aspect that I think is kind of interesting, and it has to do with more or less making maybe an open world feel more alive or even current. Definitely more interactive, as one modder apparently attached AI to different NPC characters, NPCs walking around in GTA 5. There's a video that's posted up right now on YouTube that's kind of interesting to see, and you can see some of it here. This is posted up by Block. And apparently this is the Grand Theft Auto Sentient Streets in-world AI mod. So you could, I guess, use this mod for GTA 5 on your PC. And the idea is they're powered by 30 plus AI models that will allow you to have conversations with these different characters who are walking around. So the idea and what they show off here is you have to get their attention, that being the character, say, walking around on the street like a police officer, and then you speak into your microphone to have conversations with them where you can just kind of take things off into the backstory of that character. Why are you named this, for example, is something they did. And it took a few seconds here and there, most likely as the AI is processing what was said to them and coming up with a response that would, I guess, feel more lifelike and then respond back to you, which this is, I think, more of a proof of concept and something early on that would take a lot of refinement or just development time overall at a large AAA studio to implement. But I think this would be a good use case of AI in games, as it would work to give these NPCs walking around something interesting to say. And who knows, maybe because the AI would be updated over time, could keep things more current event oriented. So you walk up and talk to them about something that's going on in the real world, and they're able to respond and even have conversations with you about that. It's also possible, I guess, that the AI could be updated with things that are going on in the game, and maybe their responses can alter or change depending on what's happening around them. So again, a lot of possibilities here, but I still think this is a way that AI can be integrated into gaming without causing too many issues, again, with developers outside of it or other aspects to it, and could actually add to the overall experience, especially for something like an open world, which I feel like open world games in general have become kind of stagnant. This could be a way to at least maybe take it to the next level and become interesting again. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, if you had to pick one of the original Pokemon games that were released in the US in 1998, which one are you taking? Wow, look at that. Pokemon Red at 62%, Pokemon Blue at 38%. I was always curious back in the day when I was looking at them, okay, which one are more people picking up? Because I usually want to get the one that the people around me didn't have, because obviously you can trade back and forth for specific Pokemon each cartridge. But for me, I had Pokemon Blue, and that was kind of it. I had a friend who had Pokemon Red, and we would trade different Pokemon back and forth. I think I feel like Red had like Ekans and maybe Sandshrew, and I'm trying to think of a few others, but really we just traded back and forth for Pokemon that you had to trade to get them to evolve. So Haunter was one, I believe, and I think Machoke, and I feel like Graveler was one as well, and of course Kadabra for Alakazam. So that's kind of where it was for me. I had Blue. I know if I put Yellow on here, a lot of people would have voted for Yellow because you got all the starters in it. I wanted to go back to the start of everything in the US, red versus blue, and it looks like a lot of people preferred red. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Lee, who says, what I would like to know is if the entire game will be on the cartridge, that referring to Red Dead Redemption on the Switch. I would be shocked if it wasn't. And the reason I'm saying that is because I double checked the Xbox version that I have. The one that, so if you put the disc in, for example, for Red Dead Redemption, it will download the quote unquote optimized version, the backwards compatible version for Microsoft servers for the Xbox Series. And that comes in at 7.4 gigabytes. I have a feeling the Switch version will be smaller than that, which either way tells me they'll probably be able to fit it on an 8 gigabyte cartridge. And the game at $50, I mean, come on, that, to me, there should be enough wiggle room there to get everything on one cartridge, because if there is a download required on Red Dead Redemption, Rockstars, they're going back in the hot seat after that one. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Pokemon Presents? Let me know what you thought of the presentation. Also, let me know if you fired up NSO afterwards for the Pokemon trading card game or Pokemon Stadium 2. And then also, what about Strauss Zelnick's comments on backwards compatibility not being a must-have feature? Do you think Nintendo is hearing this from some of the publishers around them? And then the PlayStation 5, have you had any issues with your USB port either breaking or even melting? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.